So I'm going to present this work that we've done in Dundee and in association with colleagues in the University of St Andrews. These are my disclosures, and I just want to mention one thing. This is a picture of Fiona Edwards, who's an amazing lady who makes tablet, which is a Scottish version of fudge. And she makes mountains of tablet, and she sells it, and she gives the proceeds to Andy Evans' group to do research in Dundee. So I've benefited from her tablet sales, very fortunately. This study was subject to the usual raft of approvals. I kind of felt I didn't need to say too much about the fact that women do find mammography painful and unpleasant on occasions, and that this can affect screening reattendance. But if we're really going to be serious about improving the experience, then we need to be able to measure it. And if we're going to introduce interventions or evaluate interventions that are aimed at improving the experience, we need to be able to measure the effect of those evaluations to see if they're useful or not. So the overarching work that we're doing at the moment is about developing robust and comprehensive measures of the patient experience in mammography. And I felt there was still a need for that because those measures that exist are not very recent, they're not necessarily brilliantly validated. And I wanted more detail about the actual mammogram itself. So the aims of the parent study are to develop and test such measures, and also measures of the most important things in actually affecting the quality of the experience that women have. But the data that I'm going to present now is a subset of all that work, and it's the free text data from the pilot questionnaires that we're working on. And the reason we included free text was partly to make it clearer if someone gave a certain response to a fixed response question, in other words, a score, we wanted to know why they were giving that response. So that was one reason for including the free text. Also, in itself, it might give us ideas as to how best we should be improving the experience, what we should be targeting. And also that it feeds back into the refinement of the questionnaires themselves. So this is a schematic to try and put it all in context. The first box on the left is completed work. So we've already done an in-depth qualitative interview study with a small number of participants, and that was published last year in the European Journal of Cancer Care. That data and established literature fed into the initial questionnaire development. Those questionnaires pre-tested and piloted, and there were 11 free text boxes in those initial questionnaires. And the little blue thing at the bottom is that's just an example of what the questionnaires look like. The second stage, after refinement based on the data from the first stage, was we only included one free text box. So this presentation is a thematic analysis of that free text data, but the overwhelming majority of the data comes from the first pilot. It was a single centre, and it was only in the static unit that we recruited women. Women were eligible if they had been invited for screening in a clinic in which we were able to recruit. And we sent the study invitations with an initial questionnaire after the invitation to screening and before the appointment. So they opted in by bringing the completed questionnaire with them. And we also asked for informed consent, but that was largely so that we could link the questionnaire data to data derived from their mammographic images. And people could opt out of that and just fill in the questionnaires completely anonymously. So pilot 1 was 236 participants. They had a questionnaire before they came, immediately before the mammogram and after the mammogram. Pilot 2 was 101 participants, and we narrowed it down to just a pre-visit and a post-mammogram for logistical reasons. Now, I've put this up for interest, really, but we're really concentrating on this column because, as I said already, the overwhelming majority of the data is from dataset 1. But I thought it was quite interesting. If you look at rows 2 and 3, the difference, so we've got 53% here with post-16 education and 64% overweight. And if you compare that to data set 2, it's quite different. And you can probably already, anyone who knows how screening invitations work will work out why this is. They're so different. The Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation figures here are based on postcode, and you can see the different shapes. So again, this is our data set to all intents and purposes. But data set 2 was much more biased towards the more affluent. So more deprived is on the left, more affluent is on the right. And so in most of our data is from this group here, and you can see we've got good representation from the more deprived groups, which I was pleased about, but we do have next to no ethnic diversity in the sample. So I just want to show you an example of exactly how we collected the data, and you can see the free text boxes here. The blue one is from pre-visit. And on the right, I've put a quantitative question as well. So this is an example of where we asked a question on a scale, and even though you might say, well, this is looking at a quality, the quality of the experience, it is quantitative data because it's on a numerical scale. And the free text data is distinct from that, and that's in the social sciences sort of research approach. That's what we mean by qualitative data, and I think sometimes terminology is used differently in different fields. So the definition really is that it's relatively naturalistic and it's not pre-categorized and it's exploratory. So that's where the distinctions lie. So to analyze the data, we used an approach which is pretty commonplace in psychology and other social sciences. It's thematic analysis. The data were all transcribed from the questionnaires into a database, and then that was exported. The NVivo software, that's a specialist software for analysing free text data, for qualitative data, for those who aren't familiar with it. And I was lucky enough to have a research assistant, effectively, who at the time was a MSc student in health psychology at St Andrews, and she coded the data with me. So she looked at it first, inductively applied code. So we didn't seek to use some kind of theoretical framework to analyze the data. We wanted the data to speak for itself. So then I had a jolly good look at the data as well, reviewed her coding. We then reached a consensus on the list of codes, which wasn't hard and fast. We could deviate from that and add extra codes if we needed to. But then we formally coded the data independently, and we agreed the final themes by consensus discussion. This is just a screenshot of NVivo, just to give you an idea. So you highlight the text. This is the survey data here. You highlight the text and you code it with a label, which is really just assigning a sort of labeling the meaning of the data or what the data is about. But I did on occasion resort to more old-fashioned methods as well. So quickly through, we elicited a lot of data about screening barriers and facilitators, actually. Just tell me when to stop. And these are quite context dependent. So although there's already quite a lot of data on this, it can be variable locally. So, and if you look in the posters, there's another one. There's a poster which also, if people think they're at risk from breast cancer, they're likely to attend. And also, but these are only attenders, remember. But we still elicited this data on barriers and facilitators. There's very strong, as other authors have shown, very strong belief in early detection. And in terms of practical things, it was about getting to the appointment and that sort of thing. In terms of the actual examination, no surprises here really. Pain was by far the most common problem. Embarrassment was minor. There was some sort of general dislike, which wasn't explicitly about pain. Quite a high proportion of coded segments about pain were about body pain as opposed to breast pain, a 3-to-2 ratio. And a lot of the women who had pain in other bits of their body, they attributed that to some pre-existing condition. In the positive experiences, overwhelmingly about the staff, and I've divided this into 3 sub-themes. So it's about the behaviourally, I mean, how people performed the examination and how they spoke and what they said. And in communication, it was mostly in this section about information. But also, it's this distinct sort of thing about what was the mammographer like, which is a little bit more difficult to pin down than actually what they said or how they said it. And then also how they made people feel. But of course, this isn't, they're not independent, they're not really separate, they interact. So just to illustrate, really. There's loads more stuff I could say about this data, but you can sort of, because even though it's qualitative, you can start to use numbers a bit because it's such a large number of participants compared to a normal qualitative study. But I think this is the sort of bottom line, really. It might be painful, but if they're treated really well and cared for really well, then the experience is okay, and they're probably more likely to reattend, although, of course, in attendance, there's so much stuff about motivation to be screened as well. So there are plenty of limitations to this study. There's research, always researcher has an influence in qualitative data, which is why it was so great to have a health psychologist who was less prejudiced than I was, perhaps as an experienced mammographer. So we've got useful information that could help locally with interventions to support informed uptake. I believe that pain does remain a major problem in mammography, but how the examination is performed and the personal qualities that the mammographers convey and the way they make women feel can help to overcome the impact of that. And that emphasises the importance of staff selection and training and monitoring. Thank you very much.